We've spoken with construction workers, delivery drivers about coronavirus impact on their livelihood, but farmers are also facing a potentially devastating blow.
The New Republic's California correspondent, Miranda Green, recently spoke with several farmers about the pandemic's impact on their planting and selling crops. One farmer told her, quote, "It has been a tumultuous period these 4 or 5 years in agriculture. It's pushed many smaller farms to the brink of bankruptcy. I fear that it's going to be considered the last nail in the coffin." Miranda joins us now via Skype to share more on her reporting. Great to have you, Miranda. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Tell us, what are some of the concerns that farmers have at this point?
Well, farmers are really concerned about the state of affairs, much like the rest of America here, but coronavirus has really affected them when it comes to their bottom line. Farmers have to rely on sales of their products to make money. And one of their biggest concerns is that there will be a place to sell their products at the end of the day. The reason for this is because coronavirus has affected, number one, where they put their products. With schools and restaurants closed, those are big markets for their wares. This is especially hitting farmers that are dealing with fruits and vegetables. And one of the other concerns they have is whether by the time of harvest there will be enough people to pick their fields. These kind of farmers rely heavily on agricultural pickers, and many of those pickers come from Mexico. About 90% of agricultural farmers who use these pickers, 90% of those H-2A workers who use this special visa come from Mexico, and the coronavirus is making it hard for them to get visas this year, leaving a lot up in the air.
So, Miranda, that's one of the things that seems perplexing, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is everyone was like, oh, but the grocery stores are still open, supermarket shelves will still be full, but farmers are still concerned. And so you talked about the restaurant industry. What about the international business? Because I know quite a bit of their product is actually sold overseas.
Yes, and that's another issue here, too. It's not just about making sure that Americans can get the food, right? The one thing that I heard from farmers over and over again is there is not a food shortage. But what actually might be happening is that there might be too much food. So many of these markets actually rely on international buyers to make up their bottom line. And we're going to see that specifically when it comes with ranchers. About 17% of all meat and poultry is exported overseas. And a lot of those markets are in Asia. We have Korea, Japan, and even Mexico are big countries that are big buyers of the U.S. pork and beef industry. And so farmers and ranchers are really worried that they're going to see their bottom line shrink when they have too much on the market, potentially coming into the summer and the fall.
And Miranda, dig into the immigration issue as well, because it's not only that they can't get workers through the visa program that's necessary, but also there are a lot of undocumented workers who assist with picking these crops. Are they also having trouble tapping into that undocumented workforce?
I believe so. Farmers for years have always been making the argument that they believe that there should be more of a visa program open to immigrant workers and more flexibility to get whether they're undocumented or documented. Farmers will always say that they want documented workers. They want to be working with the law, but there's been always an argument to have more of these workers on this H-2A program. It's very limited. Now with the U.S.-Mexico consulate closed, they're not able to do any interviews for these visa programs. And so they're worried that the farmers that they have relied on, even that limited number, might be coming into a smaller amount this year. And what that means is farmers who rely on pickers, berry farmers, cherry farmers, they're looking at potentially leaving their crops rotting in the field. And that's a big concern for them because obviously that's money on the vine.
Right. And Miranda, I think as you mentioned earlier about there could be a food surplus. Part of the issue with the surplus is that means that the price of food overall drops. And so many of these farmers, I think a lot of people don't understand this, but for non-corporate farmers, they basically live on a lot of debt, and they have a huge amount of debt payments in order to pay to the bank. Not that much has changed in the 100 years since the Great Depression, or 70, 80 years, whatever, since the Great Depression. What are they worried about whenever it comes to their bottom lines in that fashion?
No, that's right. There's a very small margin for farmers. They operate kind of on a seasonal basis. You know, their farms and their crops can be ruined just by bad weather, rainy season. And that is something that still could affect these farmers, right? Coronavirus is just one added new factor that they're worrying about. And this is in addition to the last couple of years that have been a struggle for farmers, especially with the trade wars that they've had to deal with. Corn farmers and dairy farmers have seen their money kind of depleted by a lack of international buyers to begin with. And now they're thinking of this as one farmer told me, a final nail in the coffin. They're really worried that this is just all adding up to the point that even with the money that they are receiving from a bailout won't be enough because their markets and what they're doing is just going to be changing so dramatically and they don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we've been covering here, farmer income has been way down, not even just over the past few years, but over the past really decade. And we've seen increasing numbers of bankruptcies. We've seen farm consolidation, small farmers unable to make it. And sadly, we've seen an increase in farmer suicide going along with that. Is Washington attuned to these problems? Do you see any interest in Washington in helping to make sure that farmers make it through this crisis okay?
Washington is aware, right? We do have the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and farmers were included in the stimulus package that just came out. So they will be seeing some of that money. I think there is lots of knowledge in Washington that, you know, we need to rely on our farmers. Obviously, America still needs to be producing its own food, but there are a lot of factors that are making that a lot harder for these farmers to survive. And obviously, it's a mental health issue for a lot of them as well. The question is, will it be enough for these farmers at the end of the day? A lot of them potentially are leaving the industry because they can't make it. Their families are kind of moving on. And that's not good for the U.S. because we don't want to have to be entirely reliant on foreign countries for our food. And especially we're seeing that now with this COVID impact. You know, we need a scenario where we can rely on farmers and get that food quickly if there is a surge in need.
Well, very interesting. Thank you, Miranda. Thank you for highlighting it for us.
Thanks for covering this, Miranda.
Thanks for having me.
Next on Rising, The Intercept's Glenn Greenwald. He tells us why he's open to expansions of government surveillance, but only in this instance. That's next.